welcome back everyone. Today we continue with the next part of this series called What If Future Gohan Was Never Killed by the Androids. Let's aim for 350 likes on this one. Also, don't forget to leave a comment letting me know if you've enjoyed the series so far. With that, let's begin. A month later, Gohan bobbed his head to the left, narrowly avoiding the fist flying towards him. He weaved around the rapid fire of kicks, each one aimed at his face. With a quick leap, Gohan created some distance between himself and his attacker. Charging a ki blast in his hand, he hurled it at Trunks. Trunks barely managed to cross his arms in time to block the blast, but the explosion sent dust and dirt flying into the air, obscuring his vision. In the confusion, Gohan seized the opportunity and landed a hard kick right in the middle of Trunks' back, sending him crashing into a nearby tree. Trunks pried himself out of the wood shatters, gasping. "That was a cheap shot," he shouted, charging back at Gohan with a flurry of punches and kicks. Gohan deflected or dodged each one nimbly. Finally, Gohan caught one of Trunks' punches and threw it to the side, momentarily throwing the boy off balance. A moment was all he needed. Gohan rushed in close, driving a devastating knee into the side of Trunks' leg, causing him to drop to his knees. Gohan then pulled his leg back and unleashed a powerful kick to Trunks' chest, sending him skidding across the ground before falling on his back. Trunks took a moment to catch his breath before sitting up again, only to find that Gohan had vanished. He jumped to his feet and dropped into his stance, eyes darting around, desperately searching for Gohan. A light shiver ran down Trunks' back as he felt Gohan tap a finger on his shoulder. Spinning around quickly with a punch cocked back, Trunks didn't get to release it as Gohan's fist connected first, sending him flying into another tree. "I'm tired of you doing those sneak attacks, Gohan. They're so cheap," Trunks roared as he pried himself out of the tree for the second time. Gohan dusted off his orange GI and replied, "Well, maybe if you had been tracking my ki like you're supposed to, you wouldn't have been launched into a tree." Twice, Trunks began to pull out the wooden shards that had gotten caught in his sweatpants and t-shirt. "Why do I have to focus on your Kai? It's not like I can track 18 with Kai sensing." He crossed his arms, glaring at Gohan and waiting for an answer. Gohan paused for a moment, caught off guard by the good question. He knew exactly why he wanted Trunks to be able to sense Kai well. He wanted to prepare the boy to fight any threat to Earth, not just the androids. But he hesitated to tell Trunks the full reason because the boy dreamed daily of the androids being destroyed and peace being achieved. Gohan didn't want to crush that hope by revealing his suspicions of further threats. Even if it's only a theory, Gohan thought, I don't want to worry the kid any more than he already does. The half-sane smiled, coming up with a plausible excuse. "Look, Trunks." Gohan set his hand on his hip as he explained. "When we're fighting together against 18, it'll help to track each other's key signatures during the battle so that we can make sure each of us is okay." Trunks' arms fell to his side, and his glare disappeared. His eyes filled with understanding. "Ooh, I get it now. So that's why we need to sense Kai." Trunks awkwardly scratched the back of his head. "Sorry for the, anger, I guess." Gohan scratched his chest while surveying the semi-broken forest surrounding their little battlefield. "No problem. I get the frustration." There was a long, awkward silence before Gohan blurted out, "It's, also really helpful for, if you manage to learn how to lock onto Kai's signatures, you'll always be aware of what's happening to your mom and friends." Trunks nodded before saying, "Yeah, so, are we done training today? I'm feeling kinda sore." He rubbed his arm as if to show his point. Gohan looked down with a serious stare for a few seconds before looking back up at Trunks. "No." He then entered his altered battle stance, a mix between demon stance and the turtle style taught by his father. Trunks groaned and said, "Why do we gotta keep training so much? I mean, I was fine with it at first after we beat 17, but now." Trunks sat down, his legs crossed, and continued talking. 18 hasn't attacked ever since, and it's been a month. A month, that's the longest amount of time since the androids arrived that they haven't attacked somewhere. Gohan sighed as he altered out of his stance and walked over to Trunks before plopping down next to the boy. "What are you saying, kid?" "I think," Trunks placed his hand over his chin as he spoke, "I think she knows that she can't handle you and me alone. I think she knows that if she shows her face again, she's dead." Trunks looked up towards Gohan, hoping for confirmation. Gohan, however, shook his head. "While yes, it is possible that she may think that, there may be an ulterior motive." Trunks rolled his eyes and turned his attention to a nearby leaf while resting his head on his arm. "Like what? Have you ever noticed how she never ages?" Trunks blinked a few times before turning his attention back to Gohan, eyes showing interest. "Yeah," he replied. "Well." Gohan adjusted his position so that his knee was in front of his chest with his arm resting on it. "With that and the fact that her strength has never wavered after so long, I'm guessing that it means that she's pretty close to immortal." Trunks nodded. So, you're saying that she wants to wait us out? Gohan smiled. Exactly, it's just a theory, but I'm certain that she and her brother have never had to train to maintain their strength. But us, we have to work hard to keep in top form. So she's waiting for us to get weaker. Yup, it's the reason we have to train so hard. Otherwise, when she returns, we won't be ready. Gohan stood up and stretched his arm before offering it to pull Trunks to his feet. So, do you understand why we have to keep going? Trunks took Gohan's hand, and Gohan pulled him up instantly. Gohan walked a few paces away and dropped into his stance before Trunks said, But what if I'm right? What if we don't have to do all this because she's given up? Gohan shook his head. We can't take that chance. Now come on, let's do this. An hour later, at Bulma's residence, Gohan walked out of the shower with a smile plastered on his face. He turned and looked into the mirror, grimacing as he stared at the countless scars that littered his body. The ones on his face weren't too bad. They went across his eye and cheek, which he admitted sort of made him look even more ferocious, which helped with looking intimidating in battle. The ones on his chest, however, he could live without. One ugly scar ran diagonally across his chest. It was as wide as a fist, probably because it had been put there by one. He turned and looked at the painfully ugly scars that covered his back. Many looked like small craters from all the blasts to the back he had received. A few were lines that had occurred when he had crashed through a building and had been slashed by the debris due to not having enough Kai left to protect his outer body anymore. He faced the mirror again and stared at the stump where his arm used to be. He felt at it and sighed a sad sigh. It was a strange feeling, being able to feel skin that shouldn't be there. The half-sen quickly got dressed in some basic shorts and a t-shirt before exiting into the spacious hallway. He turned left and began his long walk down the huge corridor. I swear, Gohan thought. Bulma's place is great and all, but it's way bigger than it needs to be. After a silent 5 minutes, Gohan arrived outside the huge steel-framed double doors that opened up to one of the most amazing scientific labs in the world. Gohan startled back as he heard a frustrated scream. Well, roar come from inside. Things must not be going so well in there, he thought before slowly opening one of the doors and peeking his head in. How's it going, Bulma? He said with a smile. Her answer included throwing some very sharp tools. Well, okay then. Gohan opened the door again and stepped into the room to see a grumpy Bulma sitting at her desk with her face sinking into her hand. Her desk was placed at the corner of the room, facing outward. At the center of the room lay the corpse of 17, resting on a large steel table similar to the ones used at morgues. Several feet above him, nailed to the ceiling, was a large machine Bulma had told him was supposed to produce a powerful precision laser. Laser didn't cut through, huh? Gohan asked. I just don't get this, Bulma shouted, ignoring Gohan's question. She stormed over to 17 and, wearing medical gloves, pinched at the android's skin, which folded under her fingers. It bends and folds just like normal skin. She stomped back to her desk and tapped a few buttons on her computer, triggering the laser. The red beam shot down and blasted against the exact same spot Bulma had pinched. Bulma left the beam on for a few more seconds before turning it off and stomping back over to the android. I mean, look at this. She lifted the arm, which still looked perfectly unharmed. Gohan walked over to the table and stood opposite Bulma, who still held the arm up with anger. He spoke seriously. Have you tried longer durations of time? Maybe enough time could. When you walked in, I had just finished half an hour of lasering the guy, Bulma said, crossing her arms. Gohan lifted the other arm, staring at the spot where Trunks' blade had managed to pierce through 17's shoulder. He still didn't understand how the boy had managed to do it. He pointed to the other shoulder and said, Have you tried firing at the symmetrical point to the current wound? Bulma nodded. It was one of the first things I tried. Gohan's eyes wandered to the gaping hole in the android's chest. I've told you before that I'm pretty sure I can blast through the android's skin. Bulma shook her head. I know, but doing that would damage the arm inside. I need to be able to peel back the synthetic skin and study the parts while they're still intact. It'd be pretty tough to study the structure of a charred, torn-up arm. But you can do it, Gohan asked. Bulma took a stubborn few seconds before sighing and saying, Well yes, but I don't want to have to do that. It would take probably 3 times the work and time to figure out how everything used to fit and work together. I'd much rather look at the finished product still intact and replicate it. You were originally going to study Frieza's. As the name exited his lips, an odd chill ran down Gohan's spine, forcing him to pause. Bulma tilted her head. You okay? Gohan blinked a few times. Yeah, I'm fine. Anyway, as I was saying, yeah, I get it. I know I was originally going to piece together the broken arm, but right now we have the opportunity to simply duplicate an amazing piece of technology rather than blow it up. Bulma shoved her hands into her lab coat pockets as she finished her sentence, bearing a slight grin. Gohan allowed a few seconds to pass before responding. Fine, but if you can't get through, just ask me, alright? Bulma sighed and muttered under her breath, I swear, I bet time travel would be easier to figure out. Alright, Gohan repeated, ignoring her ridiculous comment. Bulma looked back up and nodded with a tired smile before giving a puzzled face and pulling out a crumpled piece of paper from her coat pocket. She did her best to flatten it back out and stared down at its contents before saying, oh. She turned and walked over to her desk, where she casually sat down and began typing. Gohan walked over, interested, and leaned over her shoulder as she continued to work. He asked while trying to follow what she was doing, what was that? Oh. Not much. The note was just a reminder, just something I remembered before I went to bed last night. She took a brief break to pull out a water bottle from one of the desk drawers, taking a swig before continuing her rapid typing. What did you remember? Well, when we were kids, she looked up at Gohan for a moment. You know, me and your father. Uh-huh, well, I remember your dad talking about fighting some sort of android that had fought for the Red Ribbon Army. Bulma squinted as she saw something strange on the screen before quickly dismissing it and saying, and I remember Goku saying that the android had called himself Android 8. Gohan tensed up with wide eyes before nearly shouting, you think it could be the same guy who built the androids? Bulma looked up at him with an annoyed look in her eyes. Please don't shout in my ear. Sorry, Gohan replied, embarrassed, before continuing. But do you? I don't know, Bulma said truthfully. A lot of scientists named their creations using numbers. It helps them know the order of their creations and what generation it is. Heck, I've even done it from time to time. Bulma sighed as she added, and plus, during that time period there were a lot of robots being created. I mean, I can't even remember how many Goku had to fight in our adventures. Damn. Gohan's shoulders slumped as he continued. So it could be nothing, huh? Yeah, probably. Hey, how about I call you if I find anything, huh? Bulma said, playfully shooing him away with a hand. Gohan chuckled before walking out of the lab. Half an hour later, Gohan sat on the couch while flipping through the channels. Trunks lay on his side on the floor, facing the TV, resting his head on his hand while also searching for something interesting. The silence was interrupted as Gohan heard Bulma's hard shoes clicking rapidly down the hall towards them. Trunks sat up, and both half-signs stared as Bulma came sprinting into the room. She immediately tried to speak but only got out, "You're never gonna, before kneeling in exhaustion and gasping with one hand on the floor, keeping her from falling over. Gohan chuckled and said, I told you that these hallways are too long. Trunks stood up and walked over to his mom, placing a hand on her back. You okay, Mom? Yeah, I'm fine now. Bulma pushed the arm away and straightened her back before saying excitedly, You're never gonna believe what I just found out. What? Gohan asked. Bulma smiled and said, The creator of Android 8 and 17 is the same person. Gohan's jaw dropped slightly. Really? Who is he? How do you know? Well, she began. His name is Dr. Garo, I think. I figured it out because I compared what I could examine from 17 to the blueprints of Android 8, which I found by breaking into some data files and… Gohan interrupted her. Get to the point. Okay, well, I compared the two and found that Android 17 has advancements that can directly be linked to 8's older design. Really? Gohan smiled with her. So you're saying you could use 8's older blueprints to maybe manage to get through 17's hide? Bulma shook her head. Not a chance. 8 is far too outdated to be compared to 17 or 18. But that's not why I'm excited. Oh, Gohan visually drooped. Then what else is there? I found his lab. I found where he created his androids. Bulma smiled proudly. Trunks looked at both of them, confused. Wait, what are you guys talking about? 10 minutes later, both half-Saiyans flew miles in the sky, with Trunks following the older Saiyan as the sun sank further, forcing the two to squint as their eyes adjusted. Gohan had quickly changed into his standard orange and blue fighting gi before they left. Trunks had decided to change into new attire, a blue standard Capsule Corp jacket with a black tank top underneath, finishing the outfit with some basic black jeans. Gohan knew it was foolish to have left right then and there when the sun was setting, especially since a fight with an android meant the need for full use of their sight, but he couldn't help himself. Gohan had dreamed of the day when he could find the home of those wretched androids and destroy it with them hopefully still in it, even if only for them to feel what they did nearly every day to the poor people of Earth. When he had been shoving his boots on, he had thought about telling Trunks to stay behind but dismissed the thought. The boy had been dreaming of this day just as much as he had. It felt right to let the kid help destroy 18 and the monster who had created her in the first place. Not to mention that Gohan was nervous in some ways. He didn't know what this fellow was capable of, and the training with Trunks had really come a long way. Now, Gohan knew that Trunks could hold his own in battle. Even after mulling it over for so long, Gohan still couldn't believe it. He was finally going to find the android's hideout, where they had been created, and hopefully the maker of those monsters. The half-sen grinned with evil in his eyes as he thought, when I find that bastard, he's going to pay for all the pain and destruction he's caused. I'll tear him apart, limb by. His dark thoughts were abruptly interrupted as Trunks flew up closer to him, shouting, "So what's the plan? How are we going to do this?" The boy's hand was already gripping his sheathed blade, nervous but ready for battle. Gohan paused for a moment, thinking deeply before saying, "Bulma said the lab was in a mountain plain. We'll fire an attack just around the structure to lure 18 out, then hide behind the mountains. Stay close, Trunks. I want her to search for us while we sneak into the lab. We'll ambush her when she returns and kill her in her own home." Just for a little bit of irony, he thought. Trunks nodded, then asked, "Good plan. But if it fails, shouldn't we have a plan B?" Gohan nodded. "Plan B is, if plan A fails, you get out of there. Make sure to escape. I'm pretty sure I can handle 18 on my own if I need to." Trunks mumbled something under his breath about Gohan never trusting him, but Gohan chose to ignore it. The Elder Sand slowed down his flight as the mountains came into view. "We're here." Trunks squinted, peering into the distance. "Fantastic." The search dragged on slowly, neither of them wanting to accidentally give themselves away. They flew low amongst the many pine trees and large hills that littered the mountainside. The setting sun didn't help, casting long shadows and eventually plunging them into darkness. About an hour into the search, Gohan started to get impatient. "I swear," he thought, "I gotta start questioning Bulma's sources." He turned his head as he heard Trunks sigh and say, "I don't know if we're going to be able to find this place. It's too dark, and it might not even be here anymore." Gohan cursed, realizing the boy might be right. The androids did have a nasty habit of destroying everything. It wasn't unreasonable to think they might have destroyed the lab. Quietly, he said, "Let's look for another half an hour. If nothing turns up, we'll head home and return when there's some light out." All right, Trunks grumbled as he flew up the mountain, looking from side to side before pointing and saying, "Hey look, another cave to search." He gave a sarcastic cheer before flying over to the giant hole in the mountain and casually entering it. Gohan continued his search, flying in circles around the cave Trunks had entered, waiting for his friend to exit so they could regroup. He didn't want a repeat of the last time he had left the boy alone. He was surprised when he felt his phone vibrating in his pocket. He answered it with confusion and heard Trunks excitedly whispering, "I think I found it. There's a giant door down here." Gohan immediately ended the call and flew into the cave's mouth. He watched as Trunks did his best to quietly sprint to him. The boy then led him to the very end of the cave, which had been blocked off by a set of giant steel double doors. "This is it," Trunks whispered, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Gohan nodded, his expression turning serious. "All right, Trunks, this is where it gets real. We have to be careful. One wrong move and it's all over." Trunks took a deep breath, gripping his sword tightly. "I'm ready, Gohan. Let's do this." With a final nod of agreement, the two Sens prepared themselves for the battle ahead, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them behind those massive steel doors.